In this episode, we sit down with Richard Citroen, an elite-level physiotherapist with an impressive career spanning the Australian Institute of Sport, the AIS, St Kilda Football Club, and his current role with the Geelong Cats, just to name a few. Alongside his AFL commitments and his family life, Richard also works with us here at the Geelong Sports Medicine Centre when time permits, and we're excited to have him share his expertise and his wisdom, of course. We want to explore his pathway into the elite sports physiotherapy, the latest advancements in rehab, his experiences inside the AFL, the challenges and rewards, because there'll be plenty of them, working at the highest level. And so whether you're an aspiring physiotherapist or simply curious about the inner workings of elite sports, this episode offers a fascinating behind-the-scenes perspective. Rich, you are a busy man. How do you fit it all in? But welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, Rich. Thanks. That's good to be here.
You're a busy man. There's plenty going on. And I have had a few conversations with you just in the past about managing so much that you do. You've got some really cool things happening at the moment. How does life feel at the moment for you?
Life's pretty good. Like, I'm lucky to do a lot of things that I love doing. I love being involved in the elite environment, love the people around GSMC and being involved at kind of grassroots level, and then mixing family in there with the 3 kids and wife is constant battle for time management.
It's a battle.
And a hard boss. Now, you mentioned grassroots. Grassroots of Richard Citroen.
Yep.
Where do we start? Where does it go back to? Where did you do your school?
Country boy. Country Vic.
Whereabouts?
Grew up in Golden Valley. Yep. So born in Benalla, lived in Benalla with mum and dad, and then went to school over in Shepparton for high school.
Yep. And then a high school physiotherapy at the start.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that tickled his fancy?
So I did year 10 work experience, as everyone does. Did it with a physio group or a sports med group down in Melbourne.
Yep.
And hated it. Hated every minute of it. There was the guy that I was doing it with, which I won't mention.
Yeah.
Because basically just had 4 patients going at once. He put a heat pack on one, put another machine on someone, and just kind of rolled them through like a conveyor belt.
Old school physio.
This is what physio's about. I'm not interested at all.
Yep.
So I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I loved sport. And then at school did my PE and a kind of array of things, not really knowing what to do. So then went into exercise science because I'm like, or human movement it was called back then.
Yep.
Thinking, I'll just follow what I'm interested in sport and then see where it leads me.
Yep. And then crossed over to physio?
Yeah, well, I've got about two years through a 3-year degree in human movement, and 90% of the grads were kind of thinking, there aren't many jobs out of human movement, so most people went into PE teaching, and I wasn't overly enthused by PE teaching, so was lucky to go. My brother was a very good hockey player, played and several national carnivals, and one of the national carnivals I went away with him as a brother, and one of the other families there, Charlie Bruckner was on the team, and his dad Peter Bruckner was also there, who's got a storied career in sports medicine, and there was another physio there as well, and kind of seeing what they did in the sports med realm, I'm like, if this is what physio is, I love this. This looks really cool.
Yep.
So that was 2 years through a human movement degree, and then explored opportunities to flick across into physio or rehab or that type of field, and then finished human movement. I did 1 year postgrad in exercise rehab in that kind of similar vein, and then flipped across into physio at Melbourne.
Yep. Now, physio back then, when was that? When did you graduate?
Graduated 2009. 2, 3, 4 was human movement. 5 was rehab.
Yep.
6, 7, 8. So end of 08, I graduated physio.
Yep. Now, the ATAR scores was always a popular discussion.
Yeah.
When I did physio way back 2001, my ATAR, and I'll be honest, was 51.9. Now, the ATAR now is something like 95. It was similar ATAR back then, but I didn't get anywhere near the chance of it.
Yeah. I think that these days it seems that whether it be Australia following the US or maybe just Australia acknowledging that a lot of people don't end up in the career that they first start uni in.
Yep.
So they've kind of got a more generalised degrees, and then you can kind of splinter off into whatever you're most interested in. So when I talk to other young people going through that kind of year 10, 11, 12 and beyond, I'm like, you don't have to know now. Like there's a lot of pressure on these young kids going through year 12. You need to get a really high enter to be able to get into med or law or physio or whatever it is. But I'm completely the opposite. I say you don't have to know now. Just enjoy yourself, study hard, and you know you'll follow the direction that your interests take you, and it's a lot easier to change from once you get into the uni system than what it is to actually get in the first place. If you think that year 12 scores are the be all and end all of where you're going to end up in 50 years' time, you're wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. So get into a nice general degree, find what your interests are, and then it's pretty easy to jump around within.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and then the pressure of the kids now going through that year 10, 11 and 12, as you summarise it beautifully, don't put the pressure on yourself. You have got a lot of time out there. You can go and do a degree of something, cross over to physio, and to be honest, most of the good physios come out mature age that we've tended to find.
And it's interesting you're talking about what you enjoy, so following what you enjoy. What was it for you that got you into physio in the first place? Love sports growing up? If so, what were you playing, mate?
Yeah, so I played hockey as well. Played hockey and tennis, I suppose, and then kind of got to 15 and realised that I wasn't going to be a world beater in either of those. So I just wanted to be better than average in a lot of sports and can pretty much pick up any bat and ball and not be too bad at it. So played a little bit of footy, a little bit of golf, a little bit of cricket, a little bit of a few other things. But you asked about what led me to get into physio. Yep. So it was that initial time with my brother and seeing what, I suppose, a elite sports medical unit looks like. So it's not necessarily just sports physio and being the main person to go to. It was probably working within a team and being able to bounce ideas off people to be able to optimise a rehab outcome or optimise an outcome for a team. Like that. That's the type of thing really excites me.
Yep.
And it drives me to keep going and do a few extra hours here and there because it's good fun working in a team. Like we grew up playing team sport, and effectively this is team sport, but you're actually getting paid for it and you're working in it. And I was never good enough to play and get this type of money. So being able to work in a team environment and optimise outcomes is pretty cool.
Yep. So we'll get to the meaty part of the elite sports side of things, but going from uni into how did your pathway start?
So
did you go into private practice? Did you do a hospital-based setting?
I didn't do hospital, and I think so. There was 100 people in my graduate year, and there was probably 20 or so that were mature age that you referenced that had come from another course and gone in, and we probably had a bit more of an idea what we wanted to do with physio. So physio's a lot more broad than what I thought it was. Like a lot of people think, physio, they just work in clinics and they help in sporting teams, but there's neuro physios, there's cardio physios, there's geriatric physio. There's so many areas to it, and I think that it's unfair for a physio course to try and say, you come out with a really good, experienced musculoskeletal physio, because you kind of have to get a bit breadth of everything. So they have to teach you a little bit of everything. And there was about 20 of us that kind of knew the direction that we wanted to go. There was about 20 in the course that we called med dropouts. They didn't get into medicine, so they did physio, and they were never going to go on and do physio afterwards. So they
went back into med.
Yep. In that kind of side door that we talked about before of how I got into physio. So I reckon the physio courses back then, they set you up to go into hospital where you continued to have this broad exposure to the different areas of physio, and then from there you could decide. But most of those people were going into that hospital-based physio as a 22-year-old, whereas I was a bit older and knew that I liked the musculoskeletal side of things. Yep. So I went from there into private practice and worked in a multidisciplinary sports musculoskeletal practice for a few years and really enjoyed my time in there. But I still have a bit of a problem being the one person that someone comes in and sees. Like I as I referenced before, love the idea that you come in and you get everyone helping you to optimise your outcome. So my wife and I travelled in 2011, travelled overseas for 6 or 7 months, and we had some good chats, had good times over there. But I talked to her about, I just feel like I'm kind of stuck and I can't see myself being in this as the sole practitioner for the next 20, 30 years. Yep. I kind of miss that collaborative environment. So talked about what options might be, and that part of that was further study. So part of that was masters in sports physio.
Mm-hmm. And how long does that go for?
I did it part-time over 3 years. So a grad diploma and then a master's. Yep. And that was 3 years part-time. Yep. And just did that at the same time that I was working.
Yep. What are your main differences, Rich, from your masters to your general?
Yeah, I thought it's really just very specific to the area. So we didn't do much stroke, like a neuro-based stroke or cardiorespiratory emphysema treatment. It's really specific to musculoskeletal physio, and then even more specific to the sporting realm. So instead of how to rehab post-hip replacement, it's more specific to the sporting environment and the injuries that you get in a sporting environment and how to get the rehab through there.
Yep.
So, and the research around it and evidence-based practice on that kind of thing and current evidence. Exposure to people elite in their field, so really niche area of physio that I think a lot of people associate, that's what all physios do, but it's not the case. Like 80% of the physios that kind of came through with me are not in that area.
Yep.
Nick, he mentioned something about being in Europe. I want to drill down a little bit further on this. 6 or 7 months in Europe?
Yep.
Whereabouts?
So this is a while ago now. We saved for a house deposit and spent it on a holiday, and we flew into Africa, into Morocco, then went through Europe for 5 months, and then kind of came back down through Africa, Egypt, and then down all the way down to Southern Africa and home. And we just had some chats about life and what you do with your partner at the time. And as I referenced, I was working in a multidisciplinary practice beforehand. Had some really good people in there, some really good mentors that I could kind of call upon to say, I love working here, but is there any way you could kind of point in this direction on how I can explore working in the elite setting?
Yep.
So that's how it came about. So that was at Elphington, without wanting to name drop. That was at Elphington Sports Med.
Yep.
I even before my career started, I just philosophy that if you surround yourself with good people and good practitioners, by osmosis, you're just going to become better. Yeah, and that's people in life, like as a personality and that kind of thing, but also as a clinician. So I don't think that I'm an incredibly smart human, but I'm good with people, and if I can surround myself with good people, I'm going to become a good person, good clinicians. I'm going to become a good clinician. Yep. So speak to those people and see how they went about it.
Great philosophy. Man of very good character too, Nick.
Absolutely. So came back from Europe.
Yep.
Where do we set up? Still at Elphington?
Yeah, so still at Elphington, and was lucky that Ebony Rio, who was working in there, she's a tendon specialist, and she'd done a lot of work in different areas. And I spoke to her about, she worked up at the AIS for a bit, and they had and I think still have a grad scholar program. So basically young aspiring physios that want to get into that environment can apply to do a 12-month stint in at the AIS in Canberra.
Yep.
And applied for that. She said no one ever gets it on their first go, but worth giving it a shot. So I put in my application, and then through another connection at Melbourne City, it is now, it was Melbourne Heart at the time, they said, I've got going on my honeymoon. I need a 2-week coverage. Does anyone want to cover the Melbourne City Footy Club, soccer club? So I'm like, yeah, sure, go and do that for a couple of weeks. Then she came back from her honeymoon, and then within the first 6 months, she was pregnant, so went on mat leave, and she said, do you want to just have the head physio role?
Bang.
So
Sure.
all of a sudden I kind of landed in soccer that I had no experience in, and loved my time there, but probably soon realised that I wasn't ready to do the job that I wanted to be able to do as a good head physio of a sporting club. And at the same time, when it was going through the process with AIS, and as so happened, got the job up at the AIS. So I had to make a decision: do I stay here as the head physio of Melbourne City, which was an awesome job, lots of good people around, acknowledging I didn't feel like I was ready to do a really good job of it, and the opportunities to go up to Canberra don't come around very often. So again, had a chat to my wife and decided that we'd make the trip up to Canberra. When I say we, I made the trip up to Canberra. She stayed back earning money in Melbourne.
2-hour flight.
Yeah.
2-hour flight,
Yeah.
4.5-hour drive or a bit more. So I went up there for the year and left the Melbourne City scene.
Yep. So went up there as a internee.
Yeah, it's hard to describe the role, but you're a qualified physio, and they've got a few different programs that are based in at the AIS. So they've got, at the time, they had the Joeys, or the under-17 Australian soccer side, that were kind of live-in at the AIS, sort of. And they had a volleyball side there, they had a basketball, and then they had a lot of camps-based sports and some Paralympic athletes and the like. So they had some physios that were associated with certain sports. So you'd have a Basketball Australia physio based there, Athletics Australia physio based there. You had a couple of specialist physios and me.
Yep.
And I was embedded within the soccer and the volleyball program, but could see a little bit of everything. And they kind of gave you a bit of exposure to a whole heap of different sports and athletes, and doing some research at the same time.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into the couple of sports that you were dealing with, but the sacrifice you made from leaving your wife in Melbourne to go to Canberra, this is a big thing that probably Rich harps on all the time. You need to put meat on your resume.
Mm-hmm.
So this sacrifice you made from Melbourne to Canberra for the 12 months, how did that go?
Yeah, so probably if we go back to the chats in Europe, like lots of people have a sports master's degree these days, and lots of people have done some low-level sport. And like, how do I put my resume above someone else's? And this was the decision to, well, this is a great opportunity. There's one of these every year. There aren't many people that have this on their resume, and the people up there and the contacts they've got unsurpassed.
Yep.
So that was the kind of decision to make the sacrifice to go up there. So it was probably I was probably on 40% of the pay that I was on when working at Elphington, and I was living in a different state to my wife, and so we're paying rent at two different places, and trying to travel back as much as possible. So there's another expense there. So you're definitely not doing it for the money. In fact, preface all these conversations, don't get into elite sport for the money. Do it because you love it. You're going to be better off doing something else if you want to earn good money. But money has never been a driver. But it's a challenging time when you take a 60% pay cut to move interstate, to pay twice the amount of rent between us, and live apart from your partner with no support.
But a massive stepping stone to your career.
Huge. And
So
we knew that it was only a
foundation.
12-month contract. And then from there we'd decide, there's an opportunity to stay here in Canberra or go somewhere else, and then we'd come back together and do that together. Ideally it was going to be back in Victoria, but we knew that it was a 12-month short term, then reassess.
Fair enough.
And knowing how life changes, we've all got kids. So knowing if you're future focused, hey, this is our moment, this is our window, let's take it because this is what we want to do in the future. So when you have kids on the table, Rich, and we'll talk about that a little bit now, juggling that, because they're obviously number one, aren't they? So you trying to do that with kids on the ground, I would have thought
for
would be an
me
option.
near on impossible. Everyone's different, and where you place your priorities, everyone's different in that aspect. But we had a small window. Often that window is to make hay while the sun's shining, and if you're thinking financially, well, before kids, it's a lot easier to just work your 60-hour week and get ahead, and did that for a few years. And fortunate my wife was doing that back in Melbourne. But for me, it was, this is my opportunity to get that leg up, where I may be able to put my resume ahead of some others to be able to get into the elite sport realm, and that in this instance was take a pay cut and have some other sacrifices to be able to do that.
Physio, AIS. What were the couple of the sports in the AIS that you enjoyed? You said soccer and
so
volleyball?
I was within the soccer and the volleyball programs, and they were kind of based in there, and they had their trainings and players that we saw each week. And then the soccer program, they did a weekly game through the season, and that kind of bounced around. A lot of the A-League clubs have this under 17 or under 19 equivalent, and we played a lot of those clubs. And the volleyball, they're more Olympic-based sports, so they don't have the weekly competitions. They have more yearly things, or World Cup type things and the like.
Did you travel for any sport particularly?
You've been
alluding to Nick.
Anyway, I've got the great story that we play a Monday night competition down at Crown Street Volleyball, beach volleyball. We're elite.
Elite D grade.
Elite D grade, not even D grade. Anyway, Rich has walked in with this massive, like a retro-y Australian jacket on. Didn't tell us that he participated in this physio sport. Came in Australia, volleyball, and they had a badge on it. And correct me if I'm wrong. Was it Kazakhstan? Or Iran or Iraq or something like that.
This is a legit story. You didn't purchase this.
But there's a little bit of money on it. Wasn't the first session that we had there. We were just playing. We were all very average, but having a lot of fun. And again, in that team-based environment that a lot of us miss when you've got young kids and work and whatever else. So we're like, oh, let's go and just have some fun for an hour or so once a week. And it wasn't on the first session, but after a few weeks, I'm like, oh, maybe we need a little bit of lift here. So I wore full Australian kit from
rocked in this.
in my volley roos.
The whole joint parted like Moses in the Red Sea. It's like, who is this elite athlete?
So I was lucky to travel with the volley roos to a World Cup that we had in Kazakhstan via a training camp in Iran in 2014.
Right.
So we're over. I flew to Iran and we were looking to buy a house at the time, and I missed a really good mate's wedding while I was in Iran, and I missed the purchase of our first house while we were in Iran, and then went to Kazakhstan, came home, with my full volleyball kit.
All worth it.
Yeah.
And the experience as an elite physio, travelling with a team, probably a bit different to going to Brisbane with the AFL side of things, but going to Kazakhstan and Iran, what was that like?
Yeah, I'm very different to AFL.
Yeah.
When I talked about loving being part of a team, at the AIS you feel like you're part of a team and you've got a lot of people to bounce ideas off and get assistance from. The volleyball program is nowhere near as well funded as what the AFL is or what some of the other Olympic-based sports are. So you're on bare bones skeleton staff over there, so you're doubling as you're a masseur, you're a physio, you're a doc, you're a S&C, you're a high performance, you're a bit of everything.
Yep.
And you don't speak the local language. And in Iran,
Dangerous.
We got picked up got off the plane, straight onto a bus with guys all holding their AK-47s, and then we took the team bus all the way straight into a compound with fences as high as you could see and guards on all the gates. And then inside the compound was our hotel volleyball court and a bit of concrete and nothing else. So I'm like, the volleyball stuff was pretty straightforward.
Busy.
Yeah, busy, but pretty straightforward. But you don't come home and have chats with your wife or go for a run or anything. I was doing laps of this, I don't know, compound, trying to just get some amount of exercise. But great experience.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Good story.
Walking around with a bulletproof vest on with the Australian kit or the Kazakhstan kit was different too. Now, we've got to talk about AFL, St Kilda. We mentioned in the intro, Rich. So that's AIS and St Kilda. How do they link up and how did you get there?
Yeah, so at the end of that year at the AIS, my boss at the time, mentor at the time, Craig Purdom, one of the best people I've met in physio or in sports medicine, and he just said, what do you want to do? Where do you want to head? And as I've kind of already referenced, said, I don't care what sport I work in, where I work, I just want to work with good people and good clinicians. I don't care if that's Australian synchronised swimming, the Tiddlywinks competition, or AFL, acknowledging that there's more opportunity in AFL because there's more finances in AFL, and mentioned a couple of people that I knew that were good clinicians within the AFL world, and Perd's orchestrated a few conversations, and there are a few opportunities that popped up. One of those was at Saints, and went through the interview process and got the job at Saints.
How many years at the Saints?
9 years at Saints.
Yeah, right. Good time.
Yeah.
Not many physios, Ben. Not many physios last in the AFL world for that period of time. It's a credit to Rich to his skill and his temperament and his personality that he lasted so long at the Saints. Didn't win a flag though.
No, not quite.
What years were these, Rich? So what years were these that you're at the Saints?
Started end of 2014 and then finished end of 23.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And game day for the Saints, because you hear physio and you see your physio on the back of your jersey when you're running around the field, and everyone thinks you can get into that role pretty quickly. But as you said, the sacrifices you've made to get to this point is incredible. Tell me about the game day. That's probably the most exciting part in the AFL world, I would have thought.
Yeah, game day is good fun.
Yep.
I think a lot of your work happens in the 6.5 days before game day, and then game day comes and the prep for game day is pretty straightforward because they're normally the healthier ones that are playing. It's not the injured ones that you're normally dealing with during the week. So, you rock up
So if it's a 2 o'clock start, what time would you get to the?
I'd normally get there 3 hours before.
Yep.
And we've got our list of players that we kind of go through. My personality type is I like structure, organisation, process, that kind of thing. I'm less fly by the seat of your pants, and both can work. Just for me, I like the structure. So I've got a list of players. They've all been texted the night before as to what time they come in for their physio prep around their other meetings and everything else. Some of them are OCD and they like being there really early and they like getting their prep done then. Some of them like not thinking about prep and rocking up 2 minutes prior and getting that in. So you kind of just organise the list around that, and we're taping and
Strapping,
doing
taping,
all that normal
looking
stuff,
after 'em.
normal physio stuff.
Get them ready for the game.
Yep. Ideally, there aren't too many tests. Like, it's pretty rare that you go into a game and you've got a test in the warm up. That may happen on the odd occasion, but constant communication with particularly the high performance manager or high performance manager, doc, and I suppose the coaching area. But often, if we're prepping and treating, then there's another line of comms between us and coaching staff. But yeah, occasionally there's a test in the warm up, depending on what it is, what injury it is, and what kind of medical management we're doing. Then you get to start of the game and cross your fingers for a few hours and
A win.
yeah,
No injuries.
Get the win and have a beer afterwards and roll into the next week.
There you go. And the pressure of the game, how's that when you're on the bench? Someone's got a little bit of a niggle in the hamstring. The role of the physio to the coach. Can they play? Can't they play? Do you send them back out there? Do they do a grade 1 to a grade 3? Is that your responsibility? How's that all sort of sit with you?
Yeah, that's why we do the job. Like that's why you want to do sports elite physio. Different to private practice. There's more on the line with that
Pressure.
kind of thing, and that's what drives you to get into it. And that's what you love doing, is making those decisions. And again, you're working collaboratively, because if it's a first year player, you're in round 1, they've got a long season, a long career ahead of them, then you're making a different decision with them to round 23, need to win, senior player, plenty of other options. You're probably making more of a gamble on that one than you are the first one. So it's not clear cut, this is a grade 1 hamstring, he's going to miss. It changes depending on the circumstances. And
How do we get him up?
How do we even manage him within the game? So we've got a grade 1 hammy, but it's a medial hammy instead of a lateral hammy. We don't think it's going to turn into a grade 3 6-weeker. This we might be able to manage, but he's probably not best placed playing as a small forward where he's constantly axle, high end speed. Maybe if we can speak to the coaches and get him rolling up and down a wing where he hasn't got as much of that really fast axle stuff. Understand that the coaches understand the risk that's associated with it, understand what he's going through, players on board with it as well, and maybe he can still play a role on the day to try and get the 4 points. So that's good fun.
Good influence you've got as a physio.
Well, I think it's
Well, you're the first point of contact.
Your first point of contact, and I don't know. I don't necessarily feel huge amounts of pressure, because I feel like it's shared between probably 5 or 6 main people. Like the player takes on some of that, the doc takes on some of that, the high performance manager takes on some of that, the coaches take on some of that. So everyone's in the decision themselves, and I don't really feel like I'm influencing other people. We're really just talking about taking on risk and facilitating collaborative decision making around risk taking, which is really good fun.
Part of the deal.
Yep.
So the Saints game day coming into 2019-20 season. How did that look? Now this is probably a spanner in the works for a physio, but how did that COVID hub go? Family life, sports life, the way you treated, how all that worked?
Yeah, it was interesting time for everyone. Whether they're in the sports world or not. Like 2019, 20, 21 is, we'll always remember it for the rest of our lives. Everyone's got their COVID stories. Mine was a bit different. We were living in North Melbourne at the time. If I skip the first part of 2020 and we AFL makes a decision that we're all going to move out of Victoria because that's the best way of getting games to go ahead, so we're all going to move to Queensland. We were told that we're getting a flight in, I think it was 3 days' time. we'll be gone for a maximum of 30 days, but pack for a week. It won't be for long. So on the 9th of July, we have been building a house down in Geelong, my wife and family and I, and we got the keys on the 9th of July to move in there. And 4 days prior, we fly up to Noosa with a week's notice saying we'll be back in a week. So we've got a house that's packed up, and not knowing how we're actually going to get everything down, because we had the ring of steel around Melbourne. We had family that, depending on what day it was, were able to help with packing up or not help with packing up, depending on where they came from and whether they could cross the divide.
Yeah.
And then I just take off on my wife and 2 kids at the time.
Off to Noosa of all places too.
Did it really tough. So you went for a week.
Yeah, pack for a week. I'll be back soon.
Yep, done.
Just a budgie smugglers and a singlet, and off you went.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't have many FaceTime calls from me on the beach. It was,
In the office.
yeah, it's just been a long, tough day in the office. I'm working like a slave here.
Yeah.
But we were really lucky in Noosa. We had some luck, but we had some really good leaders at the club at the time, and we stayed in Noosa for the large majority of it. A lot of families came up, of players and staff came up to Noosa and stayed with us. Mine didn't, partly because most of the people that were working in St Kilda didn't live in Geelong.
Yep.
So the restrictions in Melbourne were a lot tighter than what they were in Geelong. And my wife's a physio, so essential worker, was still able to get to work. My oldest child was quite shy child back then, and she was going to kinder. Yep. So for us, it was important that she still had that social interaction. She was still able to go to kinder, whereas in Melbourne that probably wouldn't have been possible. And we're able to get a bit of support around Geelong because you could travel more than you could in Melbourne. So for a number of reasons, my family didn't come up. So I was up there slaving away, working hard, putting
Another
bread on the
sacrifice.
table.
Yeah.
Not a sacrifice, yeah. I don't know if my wife sees it as a sacrifice.
Meat on the resume.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. This is where we're going from.
Yep.
Everyone thinks it's easy just to become a physio, but you need to sacrifice a lot to get that meat on the resume, to show, as Rich said, to be that next best person in front of the. When you put your resume down, you want to be on the top of the list.
Yeah.
And these are the little sacrifices you need to make to get to elite sport. And that's a credit to Rich. So physio in the hub, did it change much?
Yeah, lots.
Yep.
Like we were having games every 4 days.
Yep.
We were travelling from a game in Alice Springs to a game in Brisbane, which is a 2-hour drive up the road. I think the whole AFL world, including ourselves, we wouldn't have said that you can have games 4 days apart leading into that. It's like, oh no, we're going to have injuries up the wazoo. So I think everyone realised lots of different things can be done. We probably didn't train as much, because it was an hour and a half drive away, but we didn't train as much because we were playing more regularly. There was just a lot more different challenges, like a lot of different travel, sleeping arrangements, family dynamics. You were living and breathing
Stress.
every minute with the players, which normally they get some relief from us, and vice versa. You're living away from family. And there's, while I take the mickey out of living in Noosa, because there's some large positives to that, not being with your wife and now 2 kids at the time, like there's some challenges with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the physio side of things.
You mentioned the 4-day break.
Yeah.
Was it challenging?
Yeah.
You pretty much just basically play the game, rest and recover for 3 days, prep them for the 4th, and away you go.
Yep. Yeah. So instead of having a main training 4 days out, 4 days after a game, you're playing another game. Again, they were restricted in terms of the time, like the match duration was a bit less, and you probably were forced to use a whole squad as opposed to your kind of top 25 players. So it ended up being that some of these players, if you've got an older player with jointy issues that just can't play that quickly, then you have to use a younger player. So it meant that people were given opportunities. And it was a whole squad progression as opposed to, let's just concentrate on our top 25 players.
Injury-wise, compared to a normal AFL season versus the hub season, was it a big difference?
It's a good question. I think the same main injuries came about. So still we had hamstrings, still we had calves, still the odd ACL, still had concussions. So I think the profile was similar. I just think that some people and bodies were better suited to the short turnarounds and the shorter games, and some less so. So
Interesting.
Your young guys that young guys are more predisposed to getting the bony, stressy, overload type symptoms. We had a significantly impacted off-season into pre-season because of COVID, and then we kind of had a false start. We played for a little bit, and then we had a shutdown period, and then again, whereas normally these things like constant progression, they don't like big spikes and drops. So there are probably a few injuries that came up out of that.
Out of the normal. Yeah. Interesting. And adaptability you need to be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Challenges your practice. Absolutely. Now, the Cattery have called you. You're on the way. You're now at the Geelong Cats. They're the beneficiary of your services. How's that going, Rich?
Yeah, it's been really good. I left Saints for family reasons, and I loved my time there. I wouldn't change it for the world. It was a really good time. Wanted to come and just spend a bit more time with family down here. Was fortunate enough to land here at GSMC, and really enjoyed time working in private practice and seeing something other than a 18 to 32-year-old male kicking athlete. So we see some developing young bodies and some older bodies. So that's been really good. And then probably the biggest thing that I missed in private practice is that collaborative approach that I kind of mentioned way back in Elvington. While we have people in here that we can bounce ideas off, I just found it really difficult with the tail end rehabbers when I didn't have a S&C or high performance, a rehab specialist that I could say, oh, this is where he's up to. He's presenting like this today. Maybe tweak this. He's ready for that, and then roll it out. I just find it really difficult. And speaking to docs, you'd be trying to call a GP or emails or sending letters to GPs to try and collaborate around optimising someone's rehab program. And while we can do it, it's laborious. It takes time, and it's just different to the world that I've lived in for the previous 10 to 15 years. Yep. So I found myself on the side of a under-19s girls football game out in Newcombe with no one that I knew apart from a couple of patients, thinking, I clearly miss part of this world. Yep. So, I've ended up back at Cats and not missing the 20 hours of travel that I had through to Moorabbin. So it's 15 minutes up the road, and a lot of similarities. My feeling is the football clubs, a lot of similarities between all football clubs, a lot of good people, a lot of people that like-minded, trying to optimise team outcomes. So, loving it in there.
Yeah, fascinating. And so you're doing a little bit of a role here at GSMC, mentoring our younger physios, looking at some of our running athletes that you always mention, kicking running athletes, and does a great job and helps me out immensely. So it's good to have Rich part of the team.
And you're fighting fit, Nick, too. So he's obviously doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. Should see him on the volleyball court.
Yeah, moves like a steam train. So from the Cats, what's life going to hold for Rich Citroen?
I don't really know, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. As referenced right at the start, time balance, and trying to, in my head, not let people down. So that's not let GSMC staff down, not let patients down here, not let my wife and kids down at home, and also do a good job in the Cats. That's the biggest challenge for me at the moment, and probably always will be.
Yep.
You're trying to do a really good job and look after, care for people, is kind of, we've talked about it a bit, but that's my mantra is if you desperately care for people, if things go wrong, they know that it's coming from a good place, and you can't get everything right. But if you're trying hard to look after your patients or your family or your players in at the club, then hopefully most of the time you think you're a good person, you're going to do a good job. The challenge is time. It takes time to care, and while we love doing it, something's sacrificed. And when you've got a lot on your plate, then ideally that's not wife and kids. Ideally that's no one asleep at the moment.
Sacrifice. It's got to be somewhere, doesn't it? Yeah. Spot on. And I think you've pretty much touched on everything. Yeah. We're talking what it takes to be an elite physio. Yeah, what it takes to get to the top.
Yep.
For anyone that's listening.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 or 4 things that you would be telling a first, second, third, fourth year physio going through it at the moment. how to get to elite sport. Like everyone wants to be elite sport, and some people don't get me wrong. But what were 3 or 4 things that you would tell one of your students or even a younger physio here? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so you need to, you reference putting meat on your resume. You just got to start doing that at an early time. And that's not just about making your resume look good, that's helping your skill set. Yep. So that's going into sub-elite local competitions. It doesn't have to be footy, it can be anything you want. In fact, ideally it's a variety of different sports. And just being on the front line and seeing injuries when they happen and seeing people progress and being involved with the process. So often in private practice, someone comes in days afterwards and you assess and then you send off. But being involved with the process of acute injury management into diagnosis and collaboration on how the rehab process looks, and then being there through the rehab process, it's just such good learning.
Yep.
And so that's, yes, be involved. Second one is when you're doing that, especially when you're starting out, have good people around you in terms of good clinicians. So just seek out places that you think, oh, geez, I know that so-and-so works there and they're really good in a rehab space or a coaching space or whatever it ends up being. Ideally, you can get good people and good clinicians and have a lot of fun when you do it.
Yep.
Get involved at a sub-elite level. Surround yourself with good clinicians, because for me, through osmosis, you're going to kind of generate a skill set that is beneficial moving forwards. Especially pre-kids and that kind of thing, just work your ass off.
Yeah.
Like you got a window of time where you can really fill your bucket with making yourself into a good clinician and don't think about finances. This is me talking. Don't think about
100%.
finances. Just think about filling your bucket with experiences and growing your clinical skill set so that you're in a place in a few years' time to be able to put yourself in and do a good job.
Yep. I reckon the word sacrifice that you've mentioned many times through the speak is probably the critical part. Sacrificing it and just putting yourself forward and doing those little 1%ers, as everyone says.
Such an insight, like just listening to it in regards to what it takes to get to where you get to. It's such a massive commitment, but understanding that, almost not all heroes wear capes. You're in the background doing all these things. The guys on the TV get the recognition, but the work you put in and have put in to get to those positions to give yourself the opportunity to do what you love. I think that's the key takeaway. Yep. Said it 3 or 4 times. Money's not an objective. Yep. That's really cool, and I think that's a massive takeaway. And understanding that if people are listening who want to get into the trade, don't worry about the cash. You follow what you love to do.
We're pretty fortunate or anyone in any profession, if you're fortunate to get paid to work doing what you love.
It's a win.
How good is that?
Huge.
Yeah. Win-win.
Yeah, it's
and
huge.
Like, I feel really uncomfortable. Heroes and capes, like that's not what we do in physio. Like physios sit in the background and watch other people succeed, and that's where we get
That's the reward.
Yeah, that's the reward. If I can see players or patients, people that come through the door, if I can see them return to play and be happy out on the footy field, or whatever field they're in, that's where we get our reward. If you want to be a hero in physio, you're in the wrong field. You don't want to sit in the background. You want to work with other people to try and watch other people succeed. That's really where we get our reward.
Absolutely.
And I think Em's mentioned it a few times, but what do we work in our life? 90,000 odd hours we spend at work. Yeah. So to do what you love, it's really cool.
It doesn't feel like work that way.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly right.
Spot on.
Hey, Rich, thanks very much. It was a brilliant chat. Such a cool insight. I'm sorry we couldn't get further into your volleyball national sort of selection. And we got the kit out there anyway.
Part
Next
two.
Come Monday night.
Yeah, exactly. Gotta give it
You
a
want to
plug
come down for a
the
beer
volleyball
after the
team.
volleyball, then we can talk some real strategic play.
Yeah, really cool. And a great asset to have here at GSMC. And of
Absolutely.
course the Cats and everyone's loved working with you. And I know they will be down at the Cats too. So really lucky. So well done. Thanks very much for joining us, mate.
No worries. Thanks.